Hey, for those of you that are new, welcome to the channel. For those of you that are coming back, welcome back. And today's video is going to be on the NFL draft that is coming up this Thursday. Most of you probably knew that the NFL draft was coming up this Thursday, but if not, it is. The NFL draft will be in Detroit this Thursday, and night one of the draft, round one, is on night one. Will kick off at 8 p.m. So every year, the NFL draft brings all these so-called analysts out, and they start making mock drafts. Guys like Mel Kiper Jr., Todd McShay, and Daniel Jeremiah will make all these mock drafts basically from the time the end of the regular season is over and a good portion of the draft order is set. All these mock drafts get a ton of coverage across all of the media, but one thing that isn't talked about as much is all the betting lines that are available on the NFL draft. Now, that might be because the draft is a bit unpredictable, so a lot of the sports bettors out there don't like betting on it because they're not sure what's going to happen and it's hard to find value. But I think I've found 6 props that could present some value for day one of the NFL draft. To find these props, I've done some research over the past few weeks. I've looked at mock drafts from websites such as ESPN, CBS Sports, Pro Football Focus, Pro Football Network, and NFL.com. And I know mock drafts aren't the most reliable source, but amongst all the mock drafts that I've looked at, there seems to be some consensus among everyone on what's going to happen on day one, and I am going to try and leverage that in order to hit some bets and find some value on the props that are offered on day one. Now, getting into the props, the first prop that I think that could provide some value on night one of the draft is going to be over 4.5 QBs taken in round one. Now, after looking at all these mock drafts from the websites that I noted earlier, one thing has become very clear amongst all of the analysts, and that's at least 4 quarterbacks are going to be taken in the top 10 picks. And if there are 4 quarterbacks taken in the top 10 picks, that means that there are at least 22 picks left for one quarterback to be taken to hit the over on the over 4.5. Now, quarterbacks are very important in the NFL, and my reasoning behind this pick is that first-round players are given a different contract than the rest of the players that are drafted in rounds 2 through 7. First-round players are guaranteed the 4 years on their contract, similar to players drafted in rounds 2 through 7. However, players drafted in the first round have a 5th-year team option that allows the team to pick up an extra year of their contract at a significantly discounted price. So the logic behind teams taking quarterbacks in the first round is that if that guy is their franchise quarterback, instead of having to pay them $40, $50 million at the end of their 4-year contract, they can pick up that extra year at $8 or $9 million, which is a significant amount they save, and then they can develop the rest of the roster around that quarterback to try and go out and win a Super Bowl. An example of this is the Houston Texans. Currently, C.J. Stroud is looking like one of the very talented young rookies out of last year's draft class, and the Houston Texans have made some moves this offseason to develop a roster around him and potentially go make a run at a Super Bowl, if not this year, in the next 2 or 3 years, as he still will have a few more years left on his rookie deal. So because of this, there could be a team in the teens such as the Broncos or the Raiders that may want to select Michael Penix Jr. or Bo Nix, but if not, I think that there could be a chance that a team trades up into the late first round to try and secure one of those 2 quarterbacks with that 5th-year option. Now, according to the sportsbooks, this is pretty likely to happen. The over 4.5 is minus 220 is the best you can find it on ESPN Bet. So that means that it should be likely that at least 5 quarterbacks are drafted in the first round, if not 6, because I think there's a chance that Michael Penix and Bo Nix could both sneak into the first round. The second prop that I think has some value as well is also a QB prop, and that is for JJ McCarthy to be a top 5 pick. Currently, there are some rumors swirling around that JJ could be the number 1 overall pick instead of Caleb Williams, but I don't really buy it because Caleb's been the consensus number 1 pick for the majority of the offseason, if not since last offseason. However, I do think JJ will end up being a top 5 pick. The rumor is across the league that Minnesota may trade up into the top 5 to try and secure one of the 4 quarterbacks that are projected to go in those top 5 picks, and it's more than likely going to be JJ McCarthy, as the 3 other quarterbacks are projected to go picks 1 through 3. Now, I do think there's a possibility with JJ getting this hype behind him being the number 1 pick that he could go at pick 2, 3, or 4, but it's looking more than likely that he will end up being pick 5, as the Chargers will try and trade back with someone like the Vikings, the Raiders, or the Broncos. In all the mock drafts I looked at, JJ was going top 5 in every single one of them this past week that I looked at, so him to be a top 5 pick seems to be very likely, and currently the odds on DraftKings are only minus 150 for JJ to be a top 5 pick. I think there's a ton of value here. I think the hype behind JJ is picking up, and I think this is one of the few quarterback draft props that could have some value on night 1. And my third prop is also a QB prop. It's my final QB prop for the night of round 1, and that's for Minnesota to take a quarterback as their first pick. Now, I just mentioned before that Minnesota was rumored to trade up in the top 5 for JJ, and I do think that happens. In the offseason, they did sign Sam Darnold, which I don't think he's their long-term solution. I think he's going to serve more as a bridge player or a backup for their eventual draft pick, whether that's JJ or one of the other 4 quarterbacks. But currently, with the way the league's set up, there's a ton of pressure on rookie quarterbacks to come in and win right away. So I think Darnold may be that mentor and starter for the first couple months of the season to let their rookie quarterback get settled in and learn from the veteran Sam Darnold, and then when his time comes, whether it be later in the season or the start of next season, he's ready to come in and win right away and try to avoid that pressure that's placed upon them. The other reason why Minnesota might go with a quarterback is because they had a bit of a revolving door at quarterback last year. Kirk Cousins was slated to be their starting quarterback, as he had been the last few years, but unfortunately he got hurt, and that caused that for them to trade for Josh Dobbs. And then he also, I believe, got hurt. So then we saw Nick Mullins and Jaren Hall kind of bounce back and forth as their starting quarterback towards the end of the season, which made their star player Justin Jefferson get a bit upset. And I think in order to keep Justin Jefferson in Minnesota, they're going to have to get a long-term solution at quarterback, and I think one of the 4 guys is the option. So with all that being said, I would expect Minnesota to take a quarterback as their first selection in round 1, and you can currently get it at DraftKings at plus 100. So you're getting even money for Minnesota to take a quarterback, and it seems like the odds-on favorite for them is going to be one of the 4 quarterbacks as they trade up into the top 5. The fourth prop is going to be under 11.5 defensive players taken in round 1. In all the mock drafts I've looked at over the past couple weeks, only one defensive player at most has been projected in the top 10, and that was split between Dallas Turner and Quinyon Mitchell. Some didn't even have a defensive player going in the top 10 at all. Now, that's obviously because this draft class is very offensive heavy at the top with all the quarterbacks, receivers, and offensive linemen. But what that means is that leaves 22 picks for 11 defensive players to be picked in the latter half of the first round if there isn't one defensive player picked in the top 10. Which means that more than half of the picks left in the first round would need to be defensive players for this prop to lose. Now, there are some talented defensive players in this draft, but I think a lot of teams, with the way the league is going, want to go take a tight end, receiver, offensive lineman, quarterback, something to bolster their offense, and then defense is kind of considered on the back half of the draft. And every mock draft I've looked at over the past few weeks has this prop going under. A majority of the mock drafts had 10 or 11 defensive players going in the first round, so I think this prop has a ton of value with under 11.5. The odds for this bet are currently at minus 135 on ESPN Bet, so I'm personally going to jump on it, and I think you should as well. The fifth prop that I like is another plus money prop, and that's under 5.5 Big Ten players taken in the first round. Now, this prop doesn't include the whole conference realignment aspect of the Big Ten with all the Pac-12 teams coming over to the new Big Ten conference, so we don't have to worry about that. So that means that there are 5 players throughout all the mock drafts I've looked at that seem to be consensus first-round draft picks, and those players are JJ McCarthy, Marvin Harrison Jr., Olu Fashanu, Cooper DeJean, and Chop Robinson. Now, the likely swing player for this prop is going to be Jayden Newton out of Illinois. He's a defensive tackle. And based on the mock drafts I've looked at, I've seen him going anywhere from picks 28 to 30. He's not the only swing player. The other swing players included in the mock drafts that I've seen are Tyler Nubin from Minnesota and Junior Colson from Michigan. But those guys are like in one of every 10 mock drafts that I look at. So they're not all that close to being first-round picks. Either way, I think the risk behind this prop is well worth it with the odds being plus 115. I think there's guaranteed 5 Big Ten players to be taken in the first round, and it's whether or not Jayden Newton is drafted in like the last 5 or so picks of the first round that will cash this prop or not. So at plus 115, I'll definitely be taking that to have a little something on the latter half of the first round. The sixth and final prop is another plus money prop, and this might be my favorite prop of the entire video. And that is under 9.5 offensive linemen taken in round 1. This prop comes in at plus 150 currently on Fanatics, and every mock draft that I've looked at has this prop going under, with the majority of the mock drafts having 9 offensive linemen and some having 8. And a lot of the offensive linemen being taken in the first round are offensive tackles, with the interior offensive linemen being taken in rounds 2, 3, 4, 5, the later rounds, the day 2 and day 3 rounds. So I would fully expect to see, 1 or 2 offensive tackles come off the board in the first 10 to 12 picks. And there's likely a run of 3 or 4 offensive linemen between picks like 12 and 19 that'll come off the board. And then likely another run of 3 or so in the mid-20s picks like 22 to 28. But this prop is also going to depend on the last couple picks of the first round. Will those teams want to draft an offensive lineman? Personally, I don't think so. First-round draft picks are typically viewed as players that can come in and contribute right away. And those teams that are at the back half of the draft, like picks starting at 28 through 32, they have some of the top offensive lines in the league. So I don't think they're going to waste their first-round pick on a guy that's potentially a depth pick and won't play much at all because their starting offensive linemen are already set. So with that being said, I'll end up taking this prop at plus 150. Again, it'll be a fun prop that I think has a lot of value and will be worth keeping an eye on the draft later on in the night, especially if your team is one of the first few picks of the first round. So just to recap the 6 props that I highlighted in this video, those 6 props are over 4.5 quarterbacks taken in round 1, JJ McCarthy to be a top 5 pick, the Vikings to take a quarterback with their first pick, under 11.5 defensive players taken in round 1, under 5.5 Big Ten players taken in round 1, and under 9.5 offensive linemen taken in round 1. Again, Thursday night should be a lot of fun with a lot of excitement. A lot of these guys are going to be big-time NFL players in the future, so it'll be interesting to see what teams they end up going to. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you dropped a like on the video. And if you're looking for more sports betting content across all the major sports, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, whatever it may be, then you'll definitely want to stick around, hit the subscribe button, and stay tuned for the content that I have in store.